You're listening to ESQ Resource Radio on the Bets on Media Network.
Good morning. This is the ESQ Resource Radio Show. I'm your host, Frank Lopo, and I'm glad you could join us today. Unfortunately, our guest for today had to reschedule, but the good news is for the upcoming next 4 weeks, I do have several guests already booked and committed, and I just want to give everybody somewhat of an overview of where we're going with that, and also prep you up for who the guests are, because I'd certainly like you to listen in and hear what they have to say, because it's going to be a varied group of attorneys. One, Jared Allen and his partner are both criminal attorneys, so they can speak to DUI issues as well as any other, criminal activity that, as it's always funny that with attorneys, you can't be proactive necessarily and say, hey, I'm planning on getting drunk and driving. Thought I'd give you a ring. Get myself on a schedule, because I'll probably be needing your assistance at some point in time. But the one thing that they like to talk about is also how you protect your rights as an individual. And I think we've had guests on before, Pat Freer, who's also a police officer, or was a police officer, now a private detective. And, he always says, don't say anything. Yes, there are consequences if you get pulled over for not saying anything, from a standpoint that they're taking that necessarily as they're going to push you through the process and probably arrest you and take you in. But don't ever mistake the thought process that police officer is your friend. He's just gathering information. That's his job. And so as they tell you, just come clean with me, tell me, how much you had to drink. And then, as a good person who's being truthful, and you say, gosh, I had, a couple of beers at the bar, went here, had a glass of wine. And now the officer is taking down all this information to be used against you in court. So even though if you do the blood test or blow in the breathalyzer and you fail it, you're not reinforcing the story with your own words of saying, here's why I'm in this situation, here's what's going on. That only reinforces for the prosecution. And it's really a situation where it's always leverage. It's not necessarily you're a bad person, you just made a mistake, and now you have to pay the consequences for it. But they want to have leverage on you so they can then say, okay, here's what the situation is. We can reduce these charges if you accept this, this, and this. And in most cases, just like anything, it's a money grab. So he's going to, talk a little bit about that and how you would handle yourself once you get pulled over, and, certainly being respectful, acting the part, and trying not to make a bad situation worse. I have my 23-year-old son who continually thinks he's going to outsmart the police officer. And unfortunately, that always puts him in a position where it never goes the way he envisions it in his mind of how this should go. That he should be reasonable and he should listen to me. And I'm just telling him what the situation is.
But at that age, they know everything.
Oh, that's the one, just about how we have to start the conversation with him all the time is, although you know everything, let me give you some insight from my personal experience in this situation and see if that will help you understand things, because I would never, ever want to try to insinuate that you don't know what you're talking about, because you know everything.
That's a great disclaimer.
Because it's a continual battle, and it's almost comical at some points with the discussion. And then it's almost, even because I know from a parent standpoint to their children, it's almost better if you were to build the friendship with their friends and then tell them, here's what you need to tell my son.
Yeah.
Because when their friend comes up with this idea and they come home and say, hey, guess what Drew told me? Man, he's so smart.
Borderline genius.
Right. Yeah. Oh, of course he is, But we've tried to work with him on that. But that's the other thing, I wanted to talk about, but let's make sure we stick clear with who the guests are going to be upcoming. We're going to have Christy McMurdy, who's a family law attorney and also a mediator. And she has a couple of different areas and a very good entrepreneur as well. So she's going to be on the show. Jared Bennett, who is a bankruptcy attorney, is going to be a guest on the show. And I'm just sort of reaching back to some of the people who have already been on the show because for whatever reason, it seems like a lot of the folks that we do engage and say they want to be a part of it feel very intimidated by the fact that they're going to be on the radio. And rather than listening in on the show and finding out how basically easy it is and simple it is, they just tend to, want to make it feel like they're the first person ever going to be on a radio show and we should cater to them. So, having some of those people that have been on before, but it's good refreshers and finding out where they're at and some of the new things that they have, because that's one of the other things about the laws. They always are in a constant flux of change. And so they can bring some good insights to what we're doing. And, another thought I might have is maybe having one show, maybe it's into March, of having a panel of 3 or 4 of the attorneys so they don't feel like they're just the only person on the show, and just have a sort of a legal discussion. And we'll do some prep work on that. I think after today's show, me and Adam are going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff, to where we're going to start getting information out through our Facebook page, through my Facebook page, through LinkedIn, about our upcoming guest, and really sort of get the audience engaged from that standpoint, and see where that leads from getting good, credible guests. But we do have a good resource base to draw from with these guests. It's just getting them to commit to it. And as I'm finding, working with lawyers, you're susceptible to their timetable more so than their commitment, because if they have a court date or something that takes precedent over what they plan to do, they will always make sure they take care of their client, which is a good thing. But that's some of the stuff that we've got coming up. The other thing, which I was alluding to a little bit, was just getting back and always thinking in terms of just being a little more grateful and appreciative of the opportunities that we have in front of us. And I can speak for myself personally. As I talk about my 2 sons, and especially my youngest one, who is always a challenge, we tend to forget the fact that, gosh, if the worst thing he does in creating problems for me and my wife is just being a little bit mischievous, being a smart ass, and not really just being a 23-year-old kid, that's not too bad a deal, actually, because, he's not doing any of those other crazy things that
could be a lot worse.
Oh, yeah. That you're, sitting around at 1 a.m. or whatever, and you text him and he responds, and you ask him what he's doing. I'm hanging out. And I said, well, you're drinking? No, me and my buddies are just hanging out, and we're sitting by a fire, and we're out here in the desert just hanging out. I'm like, okay, Nick. So whatever. And that's fine, but it's good that he's not being foolish enough to drive and create more problems for himself and others in that situation.
Right.
So we always feel, and we tend not to take time to appreciate that from him as well. And then also just from the standpoint of just a lot of the folks that I have in my life that have really been I've been the benefactor of their input and influence in helping me achieve some of the goals that we've set out in our business, as well as just being good friends. And don't take enough of time to thank those people on a consistent basis and being sincere about it. So that's one of the things, moving forward, that I really want to, take the time. I've been working with and Adam knows her, Rita Hudgens, as a life coach, a business coach, a person who, as you engage and talk with, becomes that living, breathing conscious that I need in my life. Just somebody that's always going to say, and now what are you going to do? That, okay, here's the situation, and now what are you going to do, Frank? Instead of just having it, all these ideas in my head and not really moving forward with it. And one of the things she always talks about, especially when I get into situations in the thought process of, I've shared this with Adam as well, that I told Rita, I don't know if I'm that good or lazy, because I think I'm a very good salesperson. But a lot of times I just show up for things, whether it be a client meeting, a attorney meeting, and I just bully my way through it just based on my, skills I've learned over the years and how to read people, how to listen, instead of taking the time to prepare. And that's one of the things I've really taken focus on over the last couple months, is that at every point in my life where I've had success, whether it be personally or in business, the one thing that is consistent is I've had a coach or a mentor that I'm able to share some of those, thoughts verbally with people rather than just keeping them to myself. And to my surprise and shock, they're not thinking and saying, "You're a total idiot. Why would you do something like that?" They're very encouraging and very free with the fact that as long as you know the consequences for your actions, where are you going to go from here? And I'm always about being accountable, with consequences, because that's how we learn. And that's how we ensure the fact that, you don't stick your finger in the lock or the light socket more than once, because the consequences of that.
Right.
And so Rita's been really instrumental in helping me so when I show up, I'm present in the moment, and I'm prepared in the conversation in the moment, because it just makes it more relaxed. And like I said, when I thought I was being lazy, it's just because I truly believe I can show up and work my way through things. And the reality is, the answer is yes, you can. Yes, I can. But you work twice as hard to get to the results you want doing it that way, rather than just putting some foresight into the plan and saying, okay, here's where we're going to go and here's how we're going to get there.
And sometimes it doesn't take that much to really do that.
No,
you could take 5 minutes, or you could set aside 30 minutes or an hour. Even I've noticed, and me personally, that if you set aside 15 minutes,
right,
just to better yourself or become more prepared at something, that's 15 minutes that can go a long way. People don't say, well, 15 minutes, that's not much time.
Right.
If that's all you need, that's all you need. And that could be a huge difference on, like you mentioned, sales. You were talking about sales. That could be, that 15 minutes could be the difference between whether or not you make that sale or not.
No question, because as you take that 15 minutes and you sort of run your mind through, again, that visual action of the meeting, how it's going to go, what's going to happen, you're more prepared when, especially if you're going to have a hard conversation with somebody, you're more prepared to address it calmly and directly versus being as surprised as they were,
right.
And I always look back at when I was 19 years old, was my first experience with an attorney, and I had to go face a judge because my driving privileges were going to be revoked. And what was so funny at that moment was the attorney was just as surprised as the judge was with my record. He had not taken the time to look before he got there. And he was like, well, dude, what are you doing driving, man? He was on the judge's side. And the judge made a very quick point to me. And he says, Mr. Lopo, that the average Colorado driver accumulates X amount of points against their license in their lifetime. And you've accumulated 4 lifetimes worth.
Congratulations. Tell him what he won.
That was it. What I won was my license being suspended for 12 months, and which was fascinating to me because prior to that, I was getting a ticket every month and a half.
Lord.
And it just got ridiculous to a point where it was just funny. And it was all speeding tickets.
Rubbins Racing.
Yeah. And just being a crazy, 19-year-old kid and thinking, I was going to talk my way out of things when the officer pulled me over. I was going to be, gosh. And that's been one of those reflections that I have with my son of saying, gosh, I don't know where he gets that from. And you have to look in the mirror and think, yeah, guess where he gets that from.
I'm scared with my son. I mean, at 19 years old, it was driving fast. And I remember probably the dumbest thing I've ever done driving was I raced a train once.
Oh yeah.
And tried crossing in front of it. And
right.
Obviously I made it, but it was
right.
But
now
I could tell you after that one time I never did it again.
Right. Well, you didn't have to.
You
won. You were undefeated.
It was like
it's over.
I'm retiring.
That's exactly right.
But you do there are people out there and I can kind of relate to you and
sure.
and your son because I'm that guy where even today, I tell everybody, listen, I'm going to show you how to do everything the hard way because that's what I'm used to doing. Well,
and I agree with that because that's how, if you look at your learning style, for me, that's a learning style,
yeah.
the good, bad, or indifferent. And when I got back into college, and that was one of the first classes that you had to take was how to go to college. And they made a very interesting point to us was that if you're a person who gets your homework assignment, as soon as you have it, you go home that night, you start studying and you get it accomplished. So by class the next week, you're done, no stress, no pressure.
Right.
Where you may be the person who you wait till the day of the class to get the assignment done. And that's not the worst thing in the world. And it doesn't make that other person smarter or you not as smart. It's just your learning style.
Right.
And that, again, I always like when that stuff makes me feel good about myself in that situation that, oh, okay, well, good. I'm not an idiot as I like to think of myself in those things by waiting and waiting and waiting. But I learn better and quicker under that pressure of getting it done versus just thinking, oh, I got it done and I've got a week now that I can relax. But you know what? I was having fun.
I had fun all week when, but that goes back to the point where I said earlier in kind of the point that you make, Frank, is like, if you just set aside 20, 30 minutes throughout the week each day, as opposed to,
right.
It's Sunday. I have it, I used to do this in college it was Sunday. I had a paper due by midnight and I have no idea what I'm supposed to write it on.
Right.
So I'm going to completely stress out and be mad at everybody because I didn't do my homework that I have no idea what's due. And then I spend 8 hours studying, writing a paper, getting it turned in 3 minutes before the deadline. And then 3 days later, you find out you get an A or a high B on it. And I'm just like, yeah, I got it.
And that is exactly right. That's exactly because you sit back and you think,
you're like, it works.
That's right. This is crazy. But that's what they said. That's your learning style. And you should learn to embrace that versus being frustrated by it. And so that helped me process that. And that's one of the things that Rita's got me doing at the end of the day of just doing a reflection of, those things that I wanted to accomplish, for that day. And that's really been eye-opening for me because now I'm really able to start. Before I was one of those taskless guys where, first thing in the morning, I'd write 20 things down that I need to accomplish that day. And then crazily enough, by the end of the day that you accomplish 5 of the 20, and then the other 15 roll over to the next day, and they roll over to the next day, and they roll over to the next day. And because you're not looking at it and thinking, well, this, those 15 things aren't that important.
Yeah.
They're really, maybe somebody else should do it, or it's realistically not that important. I worked for a guy once that, he said every Friday afternoon he would come into his office and he would just take everything on his desk on the paperwork and throw it in the trash. And you're like, well, I had some important stuff that I need you to review and take a look at. And he said, you know what? If it's that important, you'll call me. And, he's the CEO of the company, so I guess he can make those rules.
Yeah.
Because I said, well, so what if I just did that with you? And he said, well, that's a different story, Frank. That's a different deal. That's
not something I recommend
right.
doing.
Yeah. When you get to that level that you can expound and say, gosh, this is how I made it to the top, because I realized again that the book Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, because that's what you start seeing yourself doing as you're working on all those stupid little things that aren't making you money, that aren't enhancing your life. And you're just in that rat race and you feel that frustration more than anything. So, we'll expand a little bit more on that. We're going to take a break here in a few minutes. And as always, we'll talk a little bit, got some exciting stuff that we've done with Strafacci Law and some debt workout stuff. And I'll share with the audience some of those settlements and workouts that we've gotten done. So we will be back right after these messages.
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, thank you for your service to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org, or call 928-284-2022.
Breaker 19. How about that bandit? You got some ears on, son?
Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
You're listening to ESQ Resource Radio on the Vets On Media Network.
Well, welcome back to the show, and again, just talking in those issues of the small stuff, and you know, like I was saying, that time in the day in the evening, to where I take a look at, you know, my day or my list of tasks, and just kind of figure out, okay, I had this meeting and it went well or it didn't go well. And why was that? You know, was I not prepared? Was I not listening? Did I talk too much in the meeting with the client? And really start honing in on some of those things that, excuse me, those things become more important for your peace of mind than, you know, because it's always fascinating to me when I was a sales manager, and salespeople, always the excuse they have for not getting the sale is because somebody cut the price. And you ask the question, do you know that for sure? Well, you know, that's the only reason they would do that. No, it's not the only reason they would do that. You know, and that's a great question to ask somebody is, gosh, we took the time, we sat down, we met, we went over things. What, you know, what went wrong, or what didn't you like about the program? What didn't you like about me? And people always look at that as a confrontation, but it's really more of getting feedback. You know, one of the things, you know, and I do a lot of networking, and I tell you, by far the best networking that's out there is Toastmasters. Because the one thing they do at Toastmasters is you get the opportunity to speak or do your presentation, you're being graded and judged by people, your peers in that group. And one of the things they have to do as part of the deal is give you constructive criticism about your presentation.
Right. Yep.
And the other great thing about that deal is it teaches you how to accept criticism without being defensive, and taking it to a point of, okay, yeah, you're right, I can do that. You know, I opened the story with X, then towards the middle, I sort of got lost. And then when I ended the story, it didn't really coincide with start to finish. And if you don't get that sort of feedback, you know, it's like I always say that, you know, when I work, you know, for myself, and you're working in your home office, there's only one genius in the room, and every idea is a great idea. Because you're thinking, gosh, that sounds so smart, man.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they buy from me? Why wouldn't they engage our firm to help them just because of how ingenious I am in that conversation? But if you really want to hear that, you know, because again, I come from a point where when I tell people, you know, I want them to be honest and critique me, what I'm really asking you to do is tell me how smart I am and how great I am. And gosh, Frank, that is so genius how you put that all together, and you made it sound so important. And you don't learn anything at that level. You learn when somebody points something out and says, you know, here's sort of where you lost me in the conversation.
You need a takeaway.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is how it could have been better, you know, and maybe give you an example of, you know, what they observed so you can utilize that down the road. Because communication is one of those, you know, that's the, you know, they say money's the root of all evil, but communication is certainly the root of all evil. Because, you know, you hear what you think you said. And you know, me and my wife went to a deal called Marriage Encounters several years ago, and through the church. And it was fascinating to walk yourself through this thing to where it's a 3-day retreat, and you come in and you can't bring your kids with you. It's just you and your spouse, and you don't have to be in a disastrous marriage in order to do it. It may be just something you do to fine tune, because the one thing they really start honing in on is your communication skills. And you know, you start out the evening with an introduction of who you are and your wife and yourself. And then they start giving you assignments, and they tell you, now you need to go back to your room, both of you. And they give everybody a legal pad. And the first exercise was at some point in your life that you two were together, you were head over heels in love, and the sun rose or the sunset and the moon rose on each other, and everything you did. And now you're in a disarray in your life. So write a letter to that person under this context that, Frank, you're standing at the altar, you're looking down at the end of the church, and you see Renee. What are you thinking at that moment in time when you're standing there getting ready to be married to that person? What are you thinking? And I'll write a letter. And and then they said, you're going to go back to the room and you're going to get stuck, and you've got an hour and a half to get this done and then come back. But once you get started, you will just go. And so you write that letter, and it's amazing when you really sit down and you think, gosh, that was the person that I knew I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and how beautiful she was, and how great this day was in this moment. And how could it get any better than this at this point in time? And you write that. And then before you come back to the class, you're supposed to let each other read your letter. And then, everybody comes back to the class, and it's just emotional that you could see everybody's been crying and tearing up and going through that and saying things to each other that they may not have said for several years about that moment. And it's just one of those things that's very freeing. And so and then you come back, and collectively you're a group, and it's other couples that are there. And then the facilitator says, is there anybody like to share? And then, my wife always puts her head down and thinks, oh, you're an idiot, because I'm the guy that, let me read my letter, man, because here it is. And so as you share that information, because I think that's one of those things. It's great to have that between yourselves, but if you can stand up and say it to the rest of the world, how impactful is that? And it's not a contest that I need to do it and everybody else needs to do it. It's just who I am from that standpoint. Right. And then they say, okay, now here's the next letter you need to go back and write. So that person that you just got married to, tragic struck and they passed away, not getting into the details of how that happened. It's not relevant to the conversation. What didn't you say to that person? Now go back to your room and write a letter of what you didn't say to that person. And so you're sitting there writing that letter, and just all this information is coming out of your brain and in that pen and on that paper. And it's just, again, another one of those emotional, gut-wrenching things. And it's 3 days of this ongoing of going back to your room, write another letter about, what you haven't said. Because what me and Renee had found out, which was crazy, is because I was traveling a lot at the time. And as a point of reference, I would say I'm in El Paso, Texas. It's 4:30 at night, and I call home. And I say, hey, how's things going? And Renee says, fine. And I say, well, I'm thinking I might spend the night and I'll drive home tomorrow. And she says, that'd be a great idea. Why don't you just drive home tomorrow? And in my mind, I'm thinking, why should I drive home tomorrow? What's going on? What am I missing out on? What's going on? I need to be there. So like an idiot, 4:30 at night, I make a 5-hour drive from El Paso, Texas, back to Phoenix. Get home at 3 a.m. and nothing has gone on. And
all because of paranoia.
Right. And the situation was this, and it really was all of the fact that what was not said, what was communicated, because again, you get so comfortable with one another, and even with your kids, that you think you say those things. Because what Renee said was, look, why don't you stay the night there, because I don't want our boys to grow up without a father. And if you fall asleep on the highway and get killed, that's not a good thing. So why don't you spend the night there? But that's not what was said. Right. And that certainly wasn't what was heard from my perspective. And that was just so amazing to understand that thing. And again, it all becomes, like I said, you get into those positions where you're just very comfortable with one another and you think you say those things, but you really just don't take the time and put in the investment to say them. And even to, our sons and just, it's great to say I love you and them to say they love me and my wife. But if you just really sit down and you communicate to them about, here's why I love you, here's why I want you to be safe, here's why I want you to make better choices. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is I'll always be your father and you'll always be my son. So that never is going to ever come apart from that standpoint. So don't worry about that. But talk to us, tell us what's going on in your world, and we can help you. And maybe you don't need our help, but we just want to be aware of what you're thinking, what's going on in your mind. And that's a lot of just, again, some of the same stuff that, I'm reflecting back on and just trying to get my head wrapped around. It's right in front of you. It's very simplistic, but we tend to complicate it with, a lot of self-importance and those kind of things from my perspective. And then just a lot of thinking that, because I've done sales all my life pretty much, I don't need to practice. But again, as I said earlier, whenever I've had the most success in my life, I've had a coach, and whether it be in sports, and that's always the analogy I use for my boys is, gosh, if you want to become a better athlete, what do? You train. If you want to become, a better sharpshooter, you spend hours on a gun range shooting.
Right.
But we don't take that same approach when we, engage in business or just in our lives, that we don't put in that effort and time to train ourselves to be more prepared. And that's one of the things that I'm encouraging with our clients is just being more prepared to deal with the people you're dealing with, and don't look at it as a confrontation. It's information gathering. Look, I'm trying to make this a better deal for me and to understand what my options are, if you can explain them to me. And that gets us to a point where, we were engaged at Strafacci for a client with Citibank. And we got a deal settled, and we asked them to provide us proof of the settlement. And they said, well, the only thing we can do for you as proof of settlement is confirm that we received the payment. And then in 30 days, we can send you out a letter stating that the account was taken care of and this is where we're at. And we're in a situation with our client that we didn't have 30 days to wait. And so we're talking to Citibank and asking him, is there anything we can do? Is there any way that we can get a document from you that shows this was taken care of and you have the funds? It was a bank transfer of money. So it wasn't like, the client wrote a check and they're waiting for it to clear and all that stuff. It was an immediate transaction. And the person on the other end of the line was saying, well, no, that's our policy. That's the way it works. And you always make that fateful question, is there somebody else I can speak to besides you that may be able to help me? Well, I can let you talk to my supervisor. That would be great. So we talk to the supervisor, and crazily enough, the supervisor says, well, yeah, here's what I need from you. If you can send me a copy of the bank statement showing that the money had posted in the transfer, I can fax you a letter saying that this was paid and this is where we're at. Problem solved.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't somebody getting in trouble. And it was just it fascinates me too that person doesn't go the extra mile to try to figure out how to help you. The other thing that fascinated me is that in today's day and age of technology, they're faxing us information. And I'm thinking, why couldn't you just email that to us?
Screenshot it, send it over.
Yeah. Well, our policy is such and such. And you're like, that's crazy. Your policy is such and such, because that's ridiculous. And so as you get into those conversations, it's just fascinating to me that, just like I said, with technology the way it is today, that somebody's using a fax machine as a communication tool. because it's always that thing where, gosh, I faxed it. I can't believe you haven't received it yet.
We sent that Morse code.
Right. I got a confirmation, said it went through, you know, and you're thinking, well, I don't have it. I don't know what to tell you. It didn't come through on my end. Well, that's fascinating to me. Are you sure? You know, and all of a sudden, you know, the conversation changed to where you're feeling like, gosh, I better investigate this. I better figure out what's wrong with my system.
Right.
When in reality, the fax probably wasn't sent. It's just somebody was covering their butt and they just didn't want to have to deal with it. But if you scan it and email it, it works pretty much automatically without a problem. You know, it may roll into a spam folder or something like that, but if you know it's coming, you're looking for it, you'll dig into that folder to see if it's there. So that was something that was interesting with a client, and I didn't spend time, you know, browbeating Citibank over the deal. It was just, we got what we wanted, and at the end of the day, that's what we needed to do. It wasn't that big a deal. But the good news and exciting news of some of the things we've been doing is getting a lot of workouts to a level of even below 10 cents on a dollar with some clients, and even getting some stuff taken care of where, you know, we had a client who had been served, gotten sued, and that's when they came to us and wanted to know what they could do to avoid getting their wages garnished. And at that point in time, we generally tell them, your situation is a little different than our normal program because they have all the leverage. They won the game. That they sued you for the $12,000 that you owed them, and the court agreed that you owe them and you need to pay them. And they will seek every legal opportunity they can to collect their money. And that's not going to be good for you. But here's what we'll do. We'll make a phone call, see if they're open to having a discussion. And this was, like I said, it was probably about a $12,000 debt. And the opening volley of negotiation on their part was, well, I think we could probably come down to $9,600.
Oh, thanks.
And you're like, well, isn't that nice? That's very nice. And it's just part of that game, part of that negotiation, because what they're looking for is what's your number. And you know, Mark said he really didn't think about it, but he just said, well, my client's prepared to offer you $1,500. And they were like, no, we're not accepting $1,500. And he says, well, we're not paying $9,600. And even though they have all the leverage, they won.
Right.
The client's a W-2 employee, and they could garnish their wages and get all $12,000. They agreed to settle us with this debt for $4,500, in a lump sum payment of $1,200 initially, and then $600 a month till it's paid off. Our client was ecstatic about that because they were thinking, I'm gonna have to pay these people $12,000, and if they garnish my wages and they get 25% of my money,
I'm screwed.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to be getting a lot. And you can go back to court and get that reduced down to 15%, but it still becomes, you got to go to the court. Now your employer knows, and your employer in most cases doesn't care. I know it's more of what we think about ourselves, and what other people are thinking about us, because we know that person in payroll is telling everybody in the office that my wages are being garnished. The reality is they can't do that. That would be a violation,
Right.
you know, of their corporate policy of sharing personal information with people. And there would be consequences for that from that standpoint. But we still, again, because we're embarrassed by the situation, we don't want anybody to know our business. And so we have to go through that little exercise with people to get them there.
Right.
So, and the reason I share that is, again, that's an opportunity that if you know someone or you're that person that just has some questions about, can this be an option for you? Can this be effective for you? Just call our office at 602-889-7288. We provide a free consultation to go over everything, and we can really help you in whatever state you're in, as far as in the United States, as long as it's not a legal issue. Because if it becomes a legal issue and somebody has to represent you in court, Mark's only available to do it as a licensed attorney in Colorado and California, and he has a person here in Arizona he works with that would represent you in that effect. But know this: our goal is not to go to court. There's no value in that. The settlements are generally 50 cents on a dollar in most of the situations with a court case, just because they have all the leverage and they use it. Because, a lot of people will say, well, if they sue me, I'll file bankruptcy. Well, then that's a good option. And the bank is asking themselves, if you could have filed bankruptcy, why haven't you? Because bankruptcy is a self-inflicted wound. It doesn't affect the bank. It affects you.
Yeah.
So they're going to make you blink in that situation. And it's also a gun you can only shoot once. When you tell the creditor, if you don't work with me, I'm going to file bankruptcy, in most cases, they're going to tell you, let us know who your attorney is and when your filing date is. They got no problem with that because it moves the file off their desk. They're done with it. It's over. It's not their money. It's not that person's money. It's a bank's money. So they got no problem with you filing bankruptcy. It's you that's going to get served and get hurt by the bankruptcy from your credit standpoint. And the other thing they know is you may only qualify for a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which means you're going to reorganize your debt and you're going to pay 70 to 80% of the principal back to the creditor over 5 years. And they can live with that. That works for them. Getting 80% of their money in 5 years is not what they agreed to, but it'll serve its purpose for them. And you also have a new financial partner, and that's a bankruptcy trustee who monitors your income for the next 5 years. So if you get a raise, you get a bonus. Your wife starts working, or husband starts working when they haven't in the past. All that money now starts going to your creditors as a percentage of that, because the goal for that trustee is to recover money for the bank.
What happens to people that are self-employed or that are on disability? They lost their job, they're on disability, and life threw a curve at them.
Well, they can still be sued. On the disability side, that depending on what that is, that those funds may be what they call in the legal world is your judgment proof. Even though they've got a judgment against you, they can't collect on it. On Social Security money, they certainly can't. Your judgment proof, if the only income you get is Social Security income, the creditor can get the judgment, and even if they wanted to start the process, but the bank by law cannot release money that's paid to you by the Social Security as part of a settlement or a wage garnishment to that bank. So in essence, your judgment proof, and you don't have to do anything.
So you'd be safe, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But you need to make sure, because some of the things that have changed of recently is that a pension in some states can be a money that's accessible to the courts from that standpoint. It doesn't sound like it should be, but they've been able to go to court and effectively get pension money that's coming into your accounts. And what they do in that with a self-employed person is they just monitor your bank accounts, and then they can do a sweep of your bank account and collect their money. And they could collect it, in February, and then they could do it again in March or April and keep doing it till they get the money. And for most consumers, that's a bad day, because when, yesterday you looked at your bank account and you had $6,000, and today all of a sudden it's a negative balance. You got a bunch of NSFs, and you're thinking, what happened? You call the bank right away, and they tell you, so-and-so here got rid of garnishment, and we released those $5,000 of funds in your account to them. Well, you can't do that, man. They say, we didn't do that. The lawyer did that. The law firm did that won the lawsuit against you, got the judgment, and that's their recourse. And as we always tell clients, it's about communication, that everything's negotiable. And when you say that, it doesn't mean it's always going to be in your favor. It's just negotiable. So you just got to be aware of that from that standpoint. That and if you do it enough, and again, as a third party for us, when like I said on that $9,600 deal, when Mark tells them this isn't going to happen, or I'm going to offer you $1,500, and they get shocked and say, "You're out of your mind. There's no way we'd accept $1,500." And then part of Mark's negotiation style and skill is he then shares with them, well, there's no way I'm going to pay you $9,500. So we both put a ridiculous offer on the table. Neither one of us are going to accept it. Now let's work towards something that we can both work to make happen versus a winner and a loser deal. Right. It's because it's not, and Mark did something the other day that was just, because as you say, that's not about winning or losing. And you get competitive in this environment and trying to do things. And, he got a settlement worked out and it was going to be a payment of, I think like $600 to the creditor. And, everything got done and they were sending over the documentation. And then Mark says, "Oh yeah, by the way, I need to break that down into 2 payments." And I said, "Well, that's not what we agreed to." He said, "Well, no, we agreed to a number. We agreed to a $600 payment to make this debt go away. But we never agreed to a time frame of when you would get that $600. And the person said, "Well, I'm pretty sure we did." And Mark said, "No, I have the letter right in front of me. It just says that the $600 will be paid to Citibank, and then this debt will be canceled. And if it's over a $600 difference, then you're going to get 1099 from the government. Standard form letter that gets sent to every client we have from the creditor once the settlement's made." And so he told the creditor, he says, "Well, here's how this is going to go, that we agreed to a $600 settlement, and in February, I'm going to send you a check for $599. And in March, I'm going to send you a check for $1, because it's going to be 2 payments, whether you like it or not." And it was just, for him, it was just that one last win to be able to say, "I got over on those jackasses." And so, they said, "Okay, you can make 2 payments." He said, "Okay, then I'll make, a $350 and a $350. And again, they were like, "What? I thought you were going to make a $599 payment." He said, "Well, yeah, I was just for conversation purposes. That wasn't real. I was going to, that's foolish. You're crazy that I would make a $599 payment and a $1 payment. We'll just send you $350 on the 25th and then $350 on March 25th. And they accepted it because they got what they wanted. It was $600. It's just that he had to get the fact that I got him to make it in 2 payments for my benefit. And that's part of the game and the strategy that you have going through with that. So, well, we're ready to take another break here. And,
no, that's,
we're done with the show. That's always amazing.
Right there. I got caught up in that thing. It's like, we're going to go right through the breaks.
Excellent. Well, like I said, next week, and we'll get some information on the ESQ Resource Facebook page. Vets on Media will advertise it. We're looking to have Jared Allen join us, the criminal attorney, and his partner. And we'll be able to hopefully add some insights to some of those troubling issues that we face on a day-to-day basis, either personally or with a family member or even somebody you know. And these guys are very good at what they do and love to help you. And then the upcoming stuff, just be on the lookout for it. We encourage you to listen. And as always, I encourage you to seek professional help with any of those legal matters that you may have pressing, because to do it yourself is a pretty scary world. So thank you all very much, and God bless. And to all the veterans, thank you for your service. And we will be back next Thursday at 9:00. Thank you. Bright stars through the